The woman glared at her with reproachful brown eyes, her graying hair drawn tightly back from a high forehead and parted in the center. Her hands clasped at her waist beneath her enormous bosom. She stopped and met the accusing glance of the strange matronly figure on the church steps. It was then she was aware of someone beside her and turned to look up into the face of a tall, handsome, black-haired man. He smiled at her, and she was struck by the evenness of his Grecian features, set off by a small tuft of black beard on his strong chin. He touched a hand to her arm and gave it a comforting squeeze. Then he led her gently forward toward the church. She tried to free herself, but the man only jeered at her and tightened his iron grip on her arm. Now they were close to the church steps, and the stout woman in black held out her arms to receive them. She was terrified of the older woman, and this was a new reason for her to struggle to free herself, but it was to no avail. The man at her side would not let her escape. She was dimly aware of the onlookers chanting some sing-song litany, and terror closed in on her as she realized this was to be her wedding. She was to have no means of retreat. Here, in the glaring sun, she was being dragged to the church entrance by this cruel stranger she had never seen before. It mattered not that he was handsome. She feared and hated him, and now the stout woman reached out and seized her other arm. She screamed wildly. It was all that was left to her. There could be no escaping from these two. But something had happened to her voice, and instead of cries for help, only hoarse whispers escaped her parched lips. Weakness and despair came over her, and she felt herself go limp in their grasp. Now they were dragging her unresisting body into the church, and she was aware of its shadows and blessed cool. The sound of mighty organ music struck up in the background. It was playing a wedding march, but in a macabre way that also thundered of the doom awaiting her. She shook her head, protesting weakly, knowing it was too late. If only they would release her, she still might get away. Get away before the ceremony began, and she became the bride of this frightening, handsome man whom she had never seen before. She was aware of him muttering soft words in her ear, and the stout woman who was at her other side supporting her made approving murmurings as well. She rolled her head back to stare wildly at the dark regions of the arched roof of the building. Perhaps from somewhere up there she might receive aid. She searched for a sign or a face, but saw nothing but the blackness. Yet even that held some comfort for her, and so she tried to concentrate on it and not think of the horror awaiting her. Something snapped loudly inside her head, and she clenched her fists in an effort to stay her thoughts. The scene around her revolved and twisted like the toy kaleidoscope she had so often peered into as a little girl. She closed her eyes and scarcely dared breathe and pressed her head back into the softness for a long time, hoping this fantasy would pass. She let her lids flutter open, and finding herself staring up into the face of the handsome stranger with the tiny tuft of black beard on his chin, she let out a small gasp of dismay. "You've come too, just as Dr. Lambert said you might," the aristocratic-looking young man said. She continued to gaze at him in surprise. "You forced me into the church," she whispered. His eyebrows raised, and he gave her an incredulous little smile. "What is that you say?" he asked. She touched a hand to her temple. "We were out in the blazing sun, and you and the stout woman dragged me into the church against my will." The young man with the handsome face listened politely, and then in an understanding tone told her, "You have been in a state of delirium. What you're talking about was undoubtedly part of some bad dream you've been having." She let the words sink in, then turning her head on the pillow, she looked about the dark room. Dark, save for an ornate lamp that burned on a table near the head of her bed, and whose glow highlighted the face and form of the handsome stranger. She said, "Where am I?" He smiled again. "In your own home. In your own bedroom. Where else?" "My own home?" She questioned him weakly. She did not know the place. Why did he insist on tormenting her this way? "You've been here for more than a week, my dear," the man at her bedside said gently. "Ever since the accident." Accident? In a vague